first, it's a bit of an exaggeration. I was not very successful. I mean, I was just doing my PhD and going along a scientific career. And it's a decision that was not sudden at all. Before I entered the Pasteur Institute to start the research and the PhD, I went to India in 1967 and met my spiritual master, Rinpoche, and became completely inspired by his quality of wisdom and compassion. So it really opened my eyes on the possibility of life that I had no idea. You know, I was not knowing what to do with my life, basically. So then, as I started doing my PhD, every summer I went 7 times back and forth from Paris to Darjeeling in India. And then I finished my PhD, and instead of doing a postdoc in the US or somewhere, I did my postdoc in the Himalayas for 50 years, so that's fine. And because that time, after 6 years, it was clear that that's where I wanted to live and what I wanted to do. And I never regretted. It was not a difficult decision. It was not a jump or slamming doors. It's just crossing a mountain pass and going to another valley. Very simple. Yeah, that's the ultimate success, yes.
And you said that was the ultimate success. What do you mean, and what is the exact experience of that?
Well, I wish I could do that fully, but at least that's my aspiration. Because you cannot say, may all beings be happy except my neighbors and this guy I cannot stand, that doesn't work. It means you have not understood the point of compassion and altruism. Compassion and altruism are not moral judgment. Because you can say, oh, this is a terrible person, like say, a bloody dictator. Altruism is about bringing the causes of happiness, and compassion about removing the cause of suffering. So a bloody dictator is a huge cause of suffering. So it's not the point, is not to kill him, but to remedy to any, first of all, wish that made the hatred, the cruelty, the indifference, the greed that has made this person act in such terrible way, may that be eradicated. May I work in education, in health, so that this kind of person doesn't arise from society. So it's all about dealing with the cause of suffering wherever they are, whatever shape they take, in whichever condition they manifest. So in that sense, you don't exclude a dictator. It's not saying, oh, he's not such a bad guy after all. Nothing to do with that. It's not. Moral judgment is one thing. It's terrible what that person is doing. But compassion is about finding the skillful way. You know, it's like a doctor. You see a mad person, violently mad person, comes to the doctor. He's hit the doctor. Doctor is not going to take a big stick and smash down the head of the person. He's going to restrain the person on the chair and then find a cure. That's compassion. It's not killing the patient. It is a fact that genuine altruism does exist. It doesn't mean that everyone is all the time altruistic. Of course not. We know there's no need for scientific proof that selfishness exists, because everybody is convinced that it exists, and there's only that. What the science has shown is that along with selfishness, there is genuine altruism. There are people who, at some moment in their mind, the main goal of an action, a word, or an intention is to benefit others, and that's the ultimate goal. That's altruism. Someone like Daniel Batson, a well-known psychologist, has spent 30 years showing that very ingenious stratagems in his lab. And so far, there was no selfish explanation for the experiment that he did. So, and they say about 40% of subjects, when given the chance to behave selfishly, did behave altruistically. So no, that's given. And doesn't mean that even those people can be altruistic all the time. And if the cost is too high, for instance, they may give up altruism and behave in a selfish way. But the second thing, which is so important, is once this is shown, then mental training can enhance that. That means more people can be more altruistic more often. And that makes a better society. And that's what neuroscience is showing through neuroplasticity. That's what meditation and contemplative science have shown for the last 2,500 years, that you can cultivate and magnify this capacity for altruism that might be a bit small and not very strong, and make it vaster and stronger. Well, the mind can be our best friend, but also our worst enemy. So, for instance, there are many causes for that. Rumination, excessive self-centeredness, there are many causes. But what's interesting is that several researchers, like John Teasdale and many others, have shown now for last 30 years, I mean, I can't name all of them, but that a mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, which deals with rumination, exaggerating things, and being so always self-centered, is as efficient to prevent relapse of depression in people who had 2 or 3 episodes than medication. And then when you do the 6-month training, if you stop, because 6 months is over, the effect goes on 1 year later, because now you have used to deal with your mind in a different way and not let it be caught by rumination. While medication, it stops when you stop taking the medicine. It doesn't mean that we should not take medicine. It means that you can combine or replace, depending on cases, but that it can be helped to deal with the mind. So it's also an issue with society which are maybe very individualistic. I mean, there's many factors in modern life that contribute to an increase of the incidence of depression. And it's a serious problem. At least in Europe, the average age of the first depression now, for those who suffer from depression, has come down from 27 years old to 16 years old in over 30 years. So it is a societal problem. There are many causes for that. One of them might be hyper-individualism and excessive self-centeredness, how I feel all the time. If you think, how I feel all the time, is very depressing, because the world is not a mail-order catalog for your desire and your feelings and all that. I went in the US, there's a drugstore chain. It's cool. So the advertisement on the top of every shop is, how do I feel? How do I look? What do I want now? So my answer was, I feel very good, thank you. I don't care how I look, and I don't need anything. So then I'm fine. I don't need to go to that drugstore. Well, there's a tendency to think that it's more realistic than to think that human nature is bad and people are, this is a kind of bias, that if someone, have a critical view on somebody or on a book or some person, is probably more realistic. And the one who thinks, no, it's a very nice person, it's a good book, this guy is naive. And the same way they think that pessimistic people are more realistic and optimistic. So science has shown this is not the case. Optimistic people are much more realist. For instance, about the need to protect yourself from UV light. If you tell, or the problem with smoking tobacco. If you tell that to a pessimistic guy, he says, well, anyway, those treatments don't work. Anyway, I just can't get out of my habits. I'm useless, so they continue. If you tell that to an optimistic person, he says, oh, I can do something about it. I can get rid of tobacco addiction. oh, it's nice if I protect myself, so they will actually be more realistic and do the thing. And so, likewise, you know, this idea that human nature is bad and everything is a bias, because it's not the case. You know, the banality of goodness is that most of the time, most of 7 billion human beings behave decently with each other. That's a fact. And that people who behave in deviant way are the minority. But they make a lot of noise because they attract attention. Wow, look at what this terrible thing that people did. You know, there's a saying in the East that says one barking dog makes more noise than 100 silent dogs. So the negative news makes much more noise than 100 good news. So we have altruistic love, that is, say, benevolence at large, that embraces all sentient beings if possible, because all sentient beings wants to be happy, so why not? So wishing them to be happy is a universal sort of love, because why should you not wish that they be happy? Yes, it's easy. So then, many beings suffer, but if you don't know that they suffer, then you will not do something to alleviate the suffering. So empathy is the alarm bell, the red light. Oh, this person is suffering. Because you feel it to affective resonance, you suffer because of their suffering, or to cognitive empathy, by thinking of the situation of the person and realizing that because you are concerned, attentive, you see that person is suffering and you understand. Therefore, you value that person in the same way that you value your own wish not to suffer, and therefore you become concerned with the person. So, if you are benevolent and empathy tells you this person is suffering, then benevolence will kick into compassion, or now I must remedy the suffering of others and the causes of the suffering. So, compassion is the application of altruistic love to suffering, triggered by the catalyst of empathy.
So it's active, you could say.
So empathy is just a very specific thing. It's not the same as compassion. It's just the thing that tells you the situation of others. You feel it or you know it. That's all. You don't need to keep it for good, because then you burn out. But then compassion is very courageous. It's constructive. It's actually boosts your courage. It doesn't deplete your inner resources. It increases them. Like the doctor on the battlefield, the more people wounded, the more courage. If he starts crying when there's a first wounded person, then what is he going to do? Just so many people, and then he goes on and on, tirelessly. So that's compassion. If you say, oh, so many people sick, and then you don't do anything. Same for animals. You see what happens in the slaughterhouse. You know, it's like a hell for animals. You say, oh, no, I can't look at that, I love animals. Then what's the use? Look at it, do something, that this cannot go on. That's it. Happiness is a way of being. It's not an endless succession of pleasant experiences. That doesn't work, it's impossible. Pleasure changes into neutral and sometimes unpleasure. You know, listen to the most beautiful music, great. 24 hours, it's a torture. So, it's a way of being. And way of being is not happiness with a big H somewhere in the brain. It doesn't exist. It is a number of qualities. Each of them can be cultivated as a skill. Like altruistic love can be cultivated. Emotional balance can be cultivated. Inner freedom, that you are not the slave of your thoughts, that can be trained. All those can be trained. If you train all of them, the integration of all those is a state of well-being, flourishing, no matter what you call it, happiness, flourishing, accomplishment. Inner freedom is probably the best word, in fact, better than happiness.